I want to get as much time with him as I can. It is Michael Shure, everybody.
Hey, Kim. Good morning.
Hi. Thanks for being here, even though Mark isn't here. I really appreciate you.
Well, it's actually better. So.
And also, Michael, I know you're a huge New York Rangers fan. Congrats on all the moves. It's looking pretty strong, minus looking at what the Boston Bruins are doing this season.
Well, there's a big minus there. And also, I mean, they got, we're going to take this time, Kim, for 44 or maybe 31 seconds of New York Rangers talk. Too much. Some dream team is sort of like a B-list dream team. I think they needed somebody on defense, and Boston got Dmitry Orlov. Not that the Caps would have traded him to the Rangers, but now he's scoring late. They're calling him Bobby Orlov up there now. So
that's a great one,
which is good.
So I don't know if you heard the news there. Are we done with Rangers?
We're done with it.
Yeah, because usually Mark, I had to fill in Mark's talking about sports to Michael for a little bit. So
Thank God you're here, Albert, because that's my downfall. Is where I would stumble and fall flat on my face. So thank you for that. I don't know if you heard the newscast, but I just had two stories back to back. One about Nikki Haley, one about Governor DeSantis in Florida, and both now. One, Haley already saying she's running for president. DeSantis hasn't officially declared, but we all know that's imminent. And both are talking woke, that, the Republicans are letting the media, the liberal media, and the Democrats talk about woke and dictate what's going on in this country. Is woke what we're looking at? Is that straight ahead?
Well, every primary election and Republicans are very good at it, adopts either one or a couple of wedge issues. And it's something that resonates with voters, Republican voters in primary states, and those are the people they're trying to woo originally. And so I think by going with woke and realizing that what woke to them is and how they are able to translate that word to voters is an important way of getting those voters. It's reminding people of the riots after the George Floyd killing. It reminds people of the sort of spike in crime and the ability to blame liberal policies on that. Of course, we know it's not so cut and dry, but that's the best part of it, is that they can just say it, and it is all encompassing, and it furthers the us versus them narrative, which is what they want, certainly in a primary, and they want to see what sort of sticks and what works for different candidates as they go into a general. They are going to have other people in this primary. It's not just going to be Donald Trump and Nikki Haley. It's not going to be just Ron DeSantis when he jumps in. I think it's going to be a handful of people that get out there, and they're going to use woke, because woke is what is a dividing word, and in elections you want to divide.
It is a dividing word, but it's also kind of an ugly issue when you think about it. It's not an issue where it's abortion policy or health policy or foreign policy. It's kind of more of an idea where you should put yourself in the shoes of someone else, where you consider someone else's point of view, not just the same thing you've always thought. So I don't know, it just seems like kind of an ugly thing to pick on, but smart nonetheless.
It's always ugly. I mean, the wedge issues tend to be ugly, whether it's gay marriage, whether it's immigration. Build a wall is basically it was the woke of that election. So what you're doing, it's us versus them, and it is taking what works for Republicans is saying that Democrats are so obsessed with every minority of every kind, whether it's gender neutrality, whether it is race, whether it is student loans, whatever it is that people are taking off of the government and looking for government protection from. Republicans say, well, that's not why the government's here, and we are going to expose those people, and we don't want an America that's built on that. So that's where their success derives sometimes, but it will work for one of or a handful of these candidates in the primary,
especially in southern states. So this story just popped up this morning. I didn't send it to you, but this is a story about former President Trump. Apparently he's having this contest where it is for people to create futuristic freedom cities. Did you see this story? I don't even know. So he wants people to come forward with the foundation of a new set of futuristic policy proposals. He's calling for a quantum leap in the American standard of living. holding a contest for people to design and create up to 10 new, quote, freedom cities built from the ground up on federal land, proposing an investment in the development of vertical takeoff and landing vehicles, the creation of hives of industry sparked by cutting off imports from China, a population surge sparked by baby bonuses to encourage would-be parents to get on with procreation. All of it, his team says, part of a larger nationwide beautification campaign meant to inspire forward-looking visions of America's future.
Right. For all of the derision that he turns toward China, this has a very Chinese kind of feel to it. It's the great leap forward type stuff, and let's build and let's mandate and let's use be damned to the environment at every turn. And it is also full of Trumpian kind of I would say hyperbole, because it's let's build this huge big thing, but you guys come up with how to do it. We're not going to suggest how to do it. We don't have a plan for it. We don't have the money for it. We don't know who would oversee this. And using federal land as if you can just do that by caveat. No, this is just one of those things that Donald Trump, a tangent that he goes off on occasionally, which is why he's it's why he lost, basically, because at a certain point, and I think even Republicans are starting to see it, that this is kind of fantasy land stuff. It reminds me of, some of the ideas he had when he was president, that are just silly, like buying Greenland and just kind of weird stuff that he did.
Yeah, but it did stick is the Space Force.
It did, but that was, that's because he put that under the guise of the military, and there, look, there were reasonable people that were supporting that, not just in a sort of fantastic way, but in a way of kind of marshaling away from NASA expense. And I mean, I'm not a Space Force guy, and I don't know enough about it, frankly, but that seems, even though it's Space Force, a little more grounded in policy than something like this would, which is kind of fantasy
high in the sky, like woo. But you mentioned there, and I think it's really important how other Republicans are already looking at him going like, okay, how are we going to control this guy? What are we going to do to rein him in a little bit so we don't look like the party of crazy? So apparently, according to this CNN article, the Republican leaders are sending warnings. They want the former president to play by the rules and put party above his own interests. Yeah, right. They say he is to behave in a way that he hasn't before. That's what they would like him to do. And so they're talking about another loyalty pledge kind of situation. I don't know what you think about all this. Are they able to control him?
No, and that's sort of the stock and trade. And foolishly trying to and making these public efforts to do it only backfires on them and makes them look weaker, because you cannot tame that lion, and nor should they want to, because when he is untamed, he's at his worst. And that's if they're running against him and they're looking for a nominee who isn't Donald Trump, their best shot is to make him look as foolish as he can. But by the same token, if he is the nominee, it shows you how difficult it's going to be to get support from as many people as they got in previous elections. But I would never doubt the power of what his movement, or I don't know if it's a movement as much as a following, holds, because they are still the elephant in the room. The more people that run in that primary, the more it would be that Donald Trump has a greater likelihood of getting the nomination. If he does, then he would laugh at the people that are trying to corral him.
Well, and that's so right, because listen to what he said on Sunday, which is, it smacks of everything that we've been through with him. The quote is from his spokesperson that President Trump, they call him, not former, but President Trump, will support the Republican nominee because it will be him. That's what his campaign people said, because it will be him, as if there's absolutely no doubt that it would be anybody else. I mean, on one hand, you kind of have to go into it assuming success, but on the other hand, that's full on Trump. There's no room for loss or any type of defeat, and it reminds people of what happened.
Right. But that's been a signature of, first of all, just about anyone who runs for office is that I'm going to win, so it doesn't matter. And his with an exclamation point, and it's worked for him in the past. And this sort of the hubris is a part of his selling point. And I think to expect them to stay or do anything differently would be foolish. And so, Ronna Romney McDaniel, who is the head of the RNC, in saying, and suggesting these pledges and things like that, she knows the tree that she's barking up, and that brand hasn't failed yet for Republicans. It failed nationally in 2020, but it within the primary and within the support in the party, it hasn't failed. So I don't know why they go after it again.
Let's talk a little bit about student loan debt forgiveness, because the Supreme Court taking up this issue. And what's interesting is that it looks like Amy Coney Barrett could be the swing voter in this particular case. It's a big deal that the Supreme Court could impact what they say is 26 million student loan forgiveness applications. And everyone's just waiting to find out, am I going to be stuck in this debt that I'll never get out of, or is there some help for me?
Yeah, I mean, when the court gets uncomfortable about making a ruling on executive order, they look at Congress and they say, well, why isn't Congress the one deciding this? Why are we deciding it? It's a way of just sort of passing the buck, which certain courts have done on certain executive order type rulings that they have to make. Look, I think that the president is on the right side of this in terms of politics, and you can't ignore that, especially a year ahead of a presidential election. That said, I don't know which way the court's going to rule. It would shock me if they didn't overturn it. But again, it is great political hay for Biden if he runs, because of the fact that that's what, when you see 26 million people making applications, it's a lot of votes right there.
I mean, I guess one positive is he can't say he didn't try. Right.
Well, of course. No, and not just try. I mean, he did it. He didn't, he put it in there. And again, it's cart before the horse. We don't know what's going to happen. If it goes back to the Congress, it's going to put members of Congress on their heels. The biggest number there is, again, that 26 million applications, meaning that those are people that are going to be fired up about this issue one way or the other. And I would imagine that a lot of those people are going to vote that issue.
Can we talk a little bit about, and I might need some background on the story from you, because this is a story where we're talking about the DC crime bill. Yeah. And there's a lot of back and forth, and I'm hoping you might be able to set the stage for me, because there's a lot that I kind of have not understanding about this.
Well, right. So the idea of self-governance is something that the District of Columbia doesn't have. Congress kind of oversees them, and now not on every sign that's put up on a lamppost, but in terms of big legislation that goes through, and in terms of law and order as well. And so the DC City Council passed what seems like a fairly progressive type of crime bill that the mayor was opposed to. Muriel Bowser, the mayor, was opposed to. And it turns out that Congress, in voting on it, didn't like it. And they assumed that the House approved it, the Senate didn't. And it seemed as if the president was going to veto that. And it would stand to reason, because he is all about deferring self-governance to the District of Columbia. And so he wouldn't want to step in, but he is not. He announced yesterday at the Democratic caucus luncheon among senators that he is not going to do that. I don't know if it was the caucus luncheon, but he was on the Hill when he announced this to the Senate caucus, that he's not going to veto it, which means that he is not going to do something that a lot of progressive Democrats wanted him to do. Now, the main thing that they're keen on here in doing that is saying that there were reductions in sentencing for home burglaries and carjackings and crimes of that nature. And he's saying he doesn't want to support that. He can't support a reduction in penalty for that. Again, we're looking for tea leaves here. This sounds like someone who is running for re-election, even though I've said that I don't think he will. This is the type of thing that, someone who's running for re-election would the side he would take.
But a lot of Democrats are pretty upset about it, it seems like.
Progressives.
Feeling like they've been led astray.
Yeah, well, progressives are people saying they've been led astray by Biden, but there's a difference between saying you think that a place should have self-governance and when it's before you on a specific issue saying, I
Yes.
disagree with that, you're allowed to do that. It's sort of the micro and the macro. In the micro, he doesn't think that you should lower the sentencing, and or
Yeah.
even if he does, he thinks it's better political. We were talking about wokeism. This is a way to fight back against that sort of thing. And so he'll be able to say, look, they tried to lower sentencing on carjacking. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? They really tried to do that. And then he owns the issue rather than vetoing it.
Yeah, I can see that it's smart, although a little bit of a political flap within his own party right now.
Yeah, it's going to hurt him big time. I think that there are a lot of, and I think that just to finish that quickly, a lot of Democrats learned a lot from the primary, the mayoral primary in Chicago this week, where Lori Lightfoot, who would be more like the D.C. Council, lost terribly, was sort of kicked out of office, mostly because of her views on crime and sentencing and lack of support for the police. So I wish that's irresponsible to say it, but the police support went elsewhere, and she was not always on the police's side. So I think that you learn from that, and you learn that, hey, this is how you get kicked out of office, and that's not what Democrats want to do.
Let's bring it to the state side now and talk about California. There's a new poll that shows that a majority of California voters do not want Governor Gavin Newsom to run for president in 2024. This is this Quinnipiac University poll of registered California voters shows 7 out of 10 don't want to see Governor GovGav, I like to call him, make a run for the White House. They say it's, according to the university polling analyst, a resounding thumbs down from the home team as California voters tell the governor, if you have designs on the big job beyond Sacramento, we are not on board.
Well, it's all in context. I mean, if you have designs on the big job, they've elected him with pluralities a number of times to a number of offices, including a recall. So the notion that, it could also be that you have Biden supporters there, Harris supporters there, who say they don't want you to muddy the water. He's already gone to the White House and said, I will not run for president unless Joe Biden doesn't run for president, then I'll reevaluate. So when he reevaluates and Joe Biden is not running for president, should that day ever come, this poll will look very, very different.
Do you think that, I mean, he said he's not running, as you mentioned. He hasn't put out a book like DeSantis has.
Right.
Do you think the fact that people are already talking about him as running for president is says more than the fact that he hasn't said anything?
Well, I mean, it's sort of typical that would happen. I mean, it's what's the next rung for Gavin Newsom, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't want to run for a Senate seat and be one of 100. He doesn't want to be the ambassador to Denmark. I think that he would probably want to, run for president.
Yeah.
And I think it's a complicated situation because you have also a vice president from the state, and they would be dipping into the same coffers as far as fundraising. And I think he would have an easier time than Vice President Harris would. But this is just all the conjecture that always happens. Gretchen Whitmer isn't running right now. People talk about, will she run? Phil Murphy, the governor of New Jersey, he'd make a great candidate, but he's an East Coaster. He's a businessman. I mean, people always think about these things. And Gavin Newsom, he's had his eyes on the prize for a very long time in his climb through politics, and he's been really successful at it. So the notion that a successful, telegenic, surprisingly issues-oriented governor might run for president, that's fodder for people like me who talk about this stuff.
Okay, so one last issue to bring up to you, because I had Albert wrote into we have a show document sheet. He said the public support for Ukraine backing is softening. 60% last May, now 46% are supporting the United States support, monetary support of Ukraine. And he's writing, what are the political realities here and among NATO allies? And then I saw the story this morning, which I think is interesting, showing U.S. support doesn't falter at the federal level. Attorney General Merrick Garland made an unannounced trip to Ukraine today, following the president's trip and Yellen's trip and everything else. So, while public support might be falling a little bit, and that kind of goes along party lines, it would seem.
Yeah.
The Biden administration, they're, one after the other, they're going to Ukraine.
Yeah, and you had, I think the most important thing was Blinken and Lavrov meeting this week for the first time in a while. The public support wanes as the news story wanes, and as America gets tired of a news story, the support and passion behind whatever side someone is on initially is likely to wane because it's not in the news all the time. I don't think it's going to matter politically, personally. I think that the Republicans are going to paint it as, look where we're sending money and look where we're not sending money. That falls flat when they talk about Israel. That falls flat when they talk about South American nations as well. So I don't think that it's, places that Republicans typically support giving money, certainly in the Amazon basin, certainly in Israel. So I don't know. I don't think people are going to vote on what happens in Ukraine. Where it becomes a political issue where these polls sort of matter is if, the old feet on the ground thing, if there are feet on the ground
Right.
or the threat of putting them there, then it becomes sort of a hot potato as far as politics.
It seems like Republicans are kind of not right out and out with it, but they seem to be gravitating toward a support of Russia. And I think it was this week or last, Marjorie Taylor Greene, my favorite person, she decided to call for an accounting of the money that the United States is giving Ukraine in this war. Do you think that support is going to be, if you're more progressive, a liberal, Democrat, what have you, that you support Ukraine, but if you're a conservative Republican, you're backing Russia? And how did we end up there?
Well, that's what people on Democrats want people to believe, that means you're backing Russia. When in point of fact, Republicans want this accounting because they're deficit hawks until it comes to the military, right? And this is an unusual place for them to be, asking for an accounting of where military dollars are going and where support is going. It's also their right to do that. I mean, in Congress, there is oversight for this kind of thing, but the point is what they're trying to make. And I think that point's going to fall flat because it is going to put them in bed with a tyrant. It's going to put them in bed with Putin, even though it's not necessarily the direction that they want this to go. They want it to go in, this is a colossal waste of money. We're blindly supporting NATO. NATO isn't doing enough for us. Why are we the ones paying for everything? And the Democrats, unusually and surprisingly, have successfully labeled that as supporting Putin. And yeah, there has been sort of tacit support for that over Ukraine and a liberal leader like Zelensky as they see him. But by the same token, I don't think it's a winning stand to take at all. And I think it's gonna bite some of them. It's a silly thing to do.
I adore you. I think it's true what Mark says about you every week, that you have forgotten more about politics than most of us will ever know. So knowledgeable and reasonable in your thoughts. And I really love talking to you about all this stuff.
All right, Kim, it's great to be here. It's great to be here without and let's go Rangers.
Let's go Rangers. Thank you so much, Michael Shure. Have an awesome weekend.
You too. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you.